Most people, they spend the majority of their life, 95% of the time, living by some past emotion, anticipating the future based on the past.
You have power over your own brain.
hmm
You are controlling your own happy chemicals using neural circuits that you built from your early experience. You can build new circuits.
Just show up for your own beneficial experiences. Open to them, feel them, let yourself have them, protect them. Don't let other people rain on your parade. Don't let voices inside your head rain on your parade.
The times in our lives when we should be taking the best care of our brain tends to be the time in our lives where we actually self-medicate with all of these factory farmed foods. We withdraw instead of connecting to our friends and the people that love us who can actually make us feel better.
Well, there's so much talk about the present moment and being present in the power of now, but most people, they spend the majority of their life, 95% of the time, either living by some past emotion or some past habit, or anticipating the future based on the past. And so we're very rarely in the present moment, and paying attention is being present. And it's a skill, just like anything else. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. So think about it. If feelings and emotions are the end product of past experiences, and you can remember experiences better because you can remember how they feel. If you wake up in the morning and you have to search for the familiar feeling called you every morning, and that feeling is unhappiness or frustration or lack or insecurity or fear, the moment you get in touch with that emotion, you're starting your day from the past because the emotion is a record of the past. Now, if that emotion is connected to memories that are mapped neurologically in your brain of certain people at certain places at certain times with certain things, then the moment you feel that emotion, you associate that emotion with the past memory, then you're activating circuits in your brain from the past. So if how you think and how you feel creates your state of being, and thoughts are the vocabulary of the brain, and feelings are the vocabulary of your body, then your entire state of being is in the past. And most people are living in the past. So their body is their unconscious mind, and it doesn't know the difference between an experience in their life that creates an emotion and an emotion that they're creating by thought alone. To the body, it's exactly the same. So those emotions start driving people's thoughts. And if they can't think greater than how they feel, and feelings have become the means of thinking, and they believe that their thoughts have something to do with their destiny, then they're thinking in the past. So they're creating more of the same life. And by the same means, if they wake up in the morning and they come back to their senses and they start out with the same routine that they did yesterday, and they're going through a series of routine habits of going to the toilet, making coffee, eating breakfast, taking a shower, driving to work the same way, then we could say for the most part a person's future is nothing more than a replication of the past, and they're not in the present moment. And if they keep doing that over and over again, that becomes a habit. And a habit is a redundant set of automatic, unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions that's acquired through frequent repetition. A habit is when you've done something so many times, the body has become the mind. So for most people, their body is dragging them into a predictable future, and they're on autopilot based on what they've done in the past, and they've lost their free will to a program. So then teaching people then how to keep their attention in the present moment and take their attention off their body, take their attention off of people in their life, take their attention off of things they own or objects they possess, places they have to go, and even time itself is the act of becoming pure consciousness. And that's when we begin to disengage from the emotions of the body in the past and the habituations of the body living in the future based on the past. And so that process then, think about it. The stronger the emotion you have, the more you pay attention to what you think is causing it. So if you feel fear, and in antiquity, if you're being chased by a predator, the moment you feel fear, you're thinking about that predator because you're going to keep it on your mind. So now what if it's not a predator, but what if it's your coworker? What if it's your boss? What if it's your ex? And the stronger the emotion you feel for those people, the more you're keeping your mind and your attention on them. So then if where you place your attention is where you place your energy, then you're giving your power away to that person or that thing. And if you got a lot of those things and objects and people, and your attention is shifting from one person to another problem to another thing, we could say then that your attention and your energy is divided. And you don't really have any energy for healing, any energy to create a new life, any energy for a mystical moment. So then breaking that association and being in the present moment requires you becoming conscious of when you're feeling guilty or feeling insecure. And the moment you start noticing it, you settle your body back down into the present moment, relax, and turn back up into that unlimited field of possibilities. And the moment you start noticing, thinking about how long have I gone, how much time is this going to go, what do I have to do today, who do I have to see, what meeting do I have, that the act of putting your attention in the predictable future based on what you did in the past and returning back to the present moment is disinvesting your energy out of the known and making room for the unknown in your life. And just like training an animal, Michael, the more you do this, the more you're able to settle down the brain and the body into the present moment. And now you're building your own electromagnetic field as you break the bonds energetically with everyone and everything in your life. And you keep your attention off the person that you think is causing that emotional reaction, then you're disinvesting your energy out of your past, present reality. And now you have the available energy to begin to change. And we've measured this, and people's energy fields get more broadened. Their brain becomes more coherent. Their heart becomes more coherent. They have significant changes in their health, just as a result of finding the sweet spot of the generous present moment. Most people, they have experiences in their life that brand them emotionally, and or a series of experiences that replicate the same emotion. And they start believing that they're their emotions, and they're not. So if those emotions are driving their thoughts and they can't think greater than how they feel, then they're thinking in the past. So then the moment they turn on a set of circuits in their brain to produce a level of mind, they all of a sudden generate more emotions and chemicals equal to how they were just thinking. So if they're feeling insecure and they start thinking insecure thoughts, the moment they get enough circuits firing, they'll make more chemicals for them to feel insecure. And then when they feel more insecure, then they'll think more insecure thoughts. And the moment they turn on those insecure thoughts, they'll feel more of those emotions. And the repetition of that loop of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking over time conditions the body to become the mind of that emotion. So now, not only they can't think greater than how they feel, but they can't think greater than their body. And so their body literally has been conditioned to become the mind of that emotion, then the body literally is in the past. So then teaching people how to get beyond their body is the act of being in the present moment as well. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't respect your body or you shouldn't honor it or acknowledge it. But when it comes time to change, you have to get beyond the very aspect of the self that keeps you connected to the past in order to create a new future. Everything in this universe is emitting light and information. That everything material has a field around it. It's energy. And our bodies are made of atoms, and atoms make molecules, and molecules make chemicals, and chemicals make cells, and cells make tissues, and tissues make organs, and organs make systems, and systems make up the body. So we're emitting energy and light all the time. Now, we lose that energy or we mismanage that energy when we turn on that fight or flight nervous system or the stress response. So the moment we start becoming stressful and we react, in antiquity, we reacted to conditions in our environment. We have to draw from the body's resources and turn it into chemistry. So the act of reacting with fear or aggression or sadness or pain or whatever, we're literally tapping the body's vital energy and turning it into chemistry, and the field around the body begins to shrink. When that happens, we become more matter and less energy, more particle and less wave. Now we're diminishing our light field. So then how do we build our own light field? Well, in fact, as we begin to lower the volume to those emotions and keep our attention off the cause of it, and we begin to settle back down into the present moment, if we keep doing that, energy is liberated from the body. Now that energy that's stored in the body is being released. And now we become more energy and less matter, more wave and less particle, and the body's starting to liberate more light and information. And now that's the available energy that we begin to build to create a new life and to heal ourselves. We spend 70% of the time or more living by some really tough emotions that range from unhappiness to negativity, to fear, to anxiety, to anger, to hostility, to frustration, to envy, to jealousy, to pain, suffering, and guilt. Those are pretty much derived from those stress hormones. And most of the people spend the majority of their life caught up in those emotions. And whether they know it or not, the act of having those emotional responses to something in their outer world or even to a thought in their own mind becomes a little bit of an arousal to the brain. So people get kind of hooked into the emotion and almost addicted to it because it gives their brain and body a rush of energy. So we now know that when a person starts feeling an elevated emotion, an emotion like gratitude or appreciation, or joy or freedom or inspiration, that those emotions have a very different effect on the body, a different effect on the immune system, a different effect on the heart. When you're angry and frustrated, your heart beats very incoherently because it's ready to run from a predator or hide from a predator or fight a predator, but no one's running or fighting or hiding. And so it's like stepping on your gas pedal and your brake at the same time. It starts to create a lot of incoherence in the heart, and the heart has its own little individual brain. So then we teach students then how to regulate an elevated emotion and create more coherence in the heart, and we measure it. And when the heart starts beating more coherently, more in an organized fashion, it sends a very clear magnetic field away from the body. That field, that energy, is a frequency, and all frequency carries information. So then a person, when they feel the elevated emotion, they're creating their bigger field, they're becoming more energy and less matter. And the intent that they have, the thought that they're thinking, is being carried on that frequency. And now they're broadcasting a different field of information and light around their body. And they're tuning into a potential that already exists in the quantum field. And if they're doing it properly, they're investing their attention into the future. They're changing their energy. They're changing their brain. They're changing their neurochemistry. They're changing their circuitry. They're changing their genes. They're changing their protein expression. And their brain and body are living in a future present reality instead of the past present reality. And the repetition of that over time begins to change a person's state of being. And now they belong to their future instead of belonging to their past. There's nothing wrong with an emotional reaction. I still have them. I mean, we all do. The question is, how long are you going to have it? That's the real question. And if you can't break that emotional reaction, then it means on some level you must be addicted to that emotion, because an addiction is something you think you can't stop. So imagine then, when you start reacting, most people don't think that they have the ability to stop it, so they don't. They think the person out there is doing it to me, or that situation is creating it. So once we say that, we're victims because we have no control over ourselves. So when we start reacting, the first thing to do is to stop, take a breath, center yourself, bring up an elevated emotion. And I know that a lot of times you don't want to do it because you want to feel angry and you want to feel frustrated and you want to feel fear, because that's the normal reaction. So the first step in any process of change is becoming aware. So you may just say, my gosh, now I'm aware that I'm angry. Now that I'm aware that I'm fearful. That's the first step. The second step is doing something about it. Taking a moment, excusing yourself from the conditions in your life just for a few minutes. Centering yourself. I just did it yesterday. Centering myself, taking a couple breaths, raising my energy, and working with my body. So I don't do that for 4 hours, because it turns out we lose a lot of energy, and we also start downregulating genes that start creating disease. So the second step is really executing a change by creating an elevated state. And so you begin to lower the volume to those survival emotions, and of course you begin to cultivate elevated emotions. And it makes sense that our students who practice this every single day in doing the inner work it's becoming a skill for them. And we see some students that are able to sustain those states for over an hour at a time, which means they don't have all their attention on their outer world now. They're actually paying more attention to their inner world, and they're not putting all their attention out there. And that's what allows them to catch it when they start feeling a certain way. So you got to practice, just like you just can't go out and hit a tennis ball unless you start practicing. And the more you practice and the more you do the work, the same thing happens with your ability to be able to regulate and change different states. Well, I think probably the first thing I would have people do is to really decide what they want in their life. I mean, that's the first step. Decide what your future could look like, and get clear on what that vision is, and write down the specifics of what you want in your life, whether it's with your family or your career or with a relationship or whatever it is, and get clear on what that vision is of yourself in the future. And then write down the emotions of how you'll feel when it happens. Will you be joyful? Will you be enthusiastic? Will you be filled with energy? Will you love your life and be in a constant state of gratitude? And now you have a clear intention and elevated emotion. And every morning when you start your day, before you open your eyes and reach for your cell phone and check your WhatsApp and your texts and your Facebook and your Twitter and your Instagram and your LinkedIn and your emails, before you plug yourself back into your same familiar world, sit there and get very clear on what that future will be like and begin to emotionally embrace it before it happens. And if you do that properly, you're moving into a new state of being. And then at certain points in your day, just break and ask yourself how you're doing. How am I doing? Am I doing well? Am I losing it? Am I falling from grace? And then recalibrate. And at the end of your day, ask yourself how you did. And if you keep changing your state of being over and over again, your state of being is your personality, and your personality creates your personal reality. And when you start seeing those changes in your life and those synchronicities, the energy and the excitement of the surprise of that event is going to inspire you to create again. And I think that's how we move from victims in our lives to creators of our lives.
That's what I call a woohoo!
I was a shy, nerdy, dorky kid. I skipped a grade and I have a very late birthday, so I was super young going through school.
Yeah.
And my parents, while being loving and decent, were each in their own way very bad at empathy. And my younger sister and brother would agree with me. And so no horrible things happened to me as a kid, but I grew up with a very thin soup of the normal social supplies, we call them in psychology, that everybody needs, even introverted, self-reliant people like myself. And by the time I got into college, it felt like there was a big hole in my heart. The result of the absence of lots of good things that we all need: mirroring, attunement, empathy, inclusion, prizing, feeling liked, feeling wanted, and also the fair amount of presence of bad things, wounds, not just deficits or lacks, wounds related to being, rejected, cast out, invisible, disappeared, and so forth. So no horrible trauma, but the usual results of a kind of C- D+ childhood. Yeah. And what happened then in college, when I was just 16, I began to notice that if I did three things, it made all the difference in the world. First, see good facts. In other words, start recognizing when people actually included me. Most of it I hadn't even recognized before, but I went looking for good facts. The girl smiles at me. How great is that? Two girls smile at me. Oh my God. Somebody throws me the football on my intramural team and I catch it and he praises me. Oh, how good is that? A group of guys say, hey, handsome, let's go get some pizza. How good is that? See the good facts. And second, feel something. Don't just rationally recognize it. I was kind of numb from the neck down when I landed in college, but feel it. Let yourself have a proportionate response to this beneficial fact. And then third, especially, take in the good. When you're feeling it, don't just let it wash through your brain, in a few seconds, momentarily pleasant, but with no lasting value. Instead, savor it, stay with it, open to it, receive it, let it land. Let the good sink into you and stick to your ribs 5, 10, 20, 30 seconds in a row. So I began doing that. Lots of little moments, but drop by drop, brick by brick, I began filling that huge hole in my heart. And then many years later, several decades later, actually, I began to understand from a neuropsychological standpoint why that was so effective and why it's so important to do that, to actually take in the good and how ultimately we can use those methods, not just for everyday well-being and effectiveness, but for spiritual practice and really fundamentally helping the world come to a much softer landing. First thing I noticed was that this practice made me stronger and kinder. In other words, I wasn't losing my edge, and I wasn't losing track of threats or challenges around me. That if anything, as I built up more resources inside myself, more inner strengths, more mental resources, I was less internally preoccupied, and therefore more able to see the real world and actually get stuff done, and also recognize, real threats, things I needed to deal with. Also, as I built up resources inside and became, frankly, happier, I became more generous and, understanding, cooperative, and forgiving and helpful to other people. So realizing that this practice didn't make me weaker, and it actually helped me get stuff done rather than getting in the way of stuff being done, helped me realize that I could have both. In other words, I could deal with challenges in life while also enjoying life. And critically important, it's a 2-for-1. Have it, enjoy it. As we enjoy the authentic, usually small, but real moments in life of gratitude or accomplishment or grit or a sense of our own capability or registering how to be one step more skillful with our partner or other people or in a sales situation or in a workplace situation, or how to be one step more wired in to our own peak performance zone, athletically or any other creatively or any other thing we're trying to do, even spiritually, that by doing that, a person actually is able to take everyday experiences that are real and use them as the basis, the fuel for building these critically important psychological muscles, as it were. Well, if you think about it, in the wild, our ancestors could make two kinds of mistakes, right? One mistake is they think there's a tiger in the bushes, or the equivalent, metaphorically speaking, a threat. Something's about to get them, but actually the coast is clear, no worries. The second mistake is to think everything's fine, feeling groovy, but there really is a tiger in the bushes about to get you, all right? What's the cost of the first mistake? Needless anxiety. What's the cost of the second mistake? No more mistakes forever. So we're designed to make this first mistake 100,000 times over to avoid making the second mistake even once. That's why most people, in most ways, overestimate threats, continually overestimate threats and underestimate opportunities and resources for managing threats and fulfilling opportunities, thus paper tiger paranoia. It's so easy to feel like it's threat level orange around you. And then we have people at any scale in relationships and families and organizations, in nations or on the world stage. We have a lot of people who use the classic power of fear to create uneasiness, anxiety, apprehensiveness, dread, preoccupations with threat and so forth. Because then when people do that, when they're preoccupied in that way, when they feel threatened, they're a lot easier to intimidate. And it's a lot easier to mobilize them to attack a dreaded other, them over there, or even on the other side of the world. So I myself pay a lot of attention to anxiety inside myself. And I'm constantly asking myself, is this fear appropriate? And second, could I deal with the challenge? Like I've done a lot of rock climbing. We talked about that. I mean, I've been in so many settings where it was challenging. It was dangerous. There were threats all around me. My body was keyed up. There was maybe anxiety at the periphery, healthy anxiety, don't slip. You're going to die if you do. Pay attention, all the rest of that. But I wasn't upset about it. I was coping. Just because there's threat or challenge doesn't mean we need to go red, as it were, into the red zone, reactive fight or flight responses inside ourselves or against other people. And that's important to realize. We can do both. We can take in the good, we can recognize the good around us, and we can help ourselves from the inside out as an act of autonomy and self-reliance and agency, rather than being dead in the water, a nail instead of a hammer as you move through life. We can do that inside ourselves while also coping with threats, dreaming big dreams, swinging for the fences, having passion with other people, being enthusiastic and creative. We can actually do both. But I've gotten more tough-minded over the years, and I've come to realize that people have to make an effort. It's interesting, Michael, people recognize they need to make efforts to get good at golfing, or operating, Excel spreadsheets or something like that. But to get better at managing their own thoughts and feelings, working with their own motivations, to become more skillful with their own reactions to other people, or to get better at getting better, to, in other words, learn how to take in the good ever more effectively and enjoyably as you go through your day. A lot of people don't realize that you need to make efforts there too. The good news is that you don't need to make a lot of effort. A few minutes a day makes a ton of difference for people. Half a dozen times a day, less than half a minute at a time, just show up for your own beneficial experiences. Open to them, feel them, let yourself have them, protect them. Don't let other people rain on your parade. Don't let voices inside your head rain on your parade. When people start doing this practice that I talk about of deliberately taking in the good and remembering that it's not just about smelling the roses, enjoying every sandwich, there's a place for that, but take in experiences of determination or fortitude or strength, or take in the realization that you really need to get control of your anger, when you're talking with your kids. I mean, whatever's beneficial, whatever's the good learning for you, let it sink in, right? When people start doing that, they start noticing that it's really enjoyable. And that naturally motivates them to do it. So that's one thing. Second, people can put little stickies around themselves, like remember to remember, or breathe, or tick moments in the day like meals, or at the end of a workout, or whether we're doing yoga or Pilates or what have you, or at the end of meditating or painting or walking the dog. Just take a few extra heartbeats, a few extra breaths to be with it, to let it reverberate, to keep those neurons firing together so they really wire their benefits into yourself. There are a lot of technical details about all this that are useful for people. Just kind of like I could say to you, hey, ride a bike. It's pretty simple. 2 wheels, just try not to fall. Yeah, there are a lot. I mean, that's kind of it in a nutshell, right? You know what I mean? Keep pedaling, use your brakes when you need to. Yeah. Pretty simple, but there's a lot of detail about getting really good at, let's say, riding a bike, especially in the mountains off trail. So there are details about this, but the essence is simple. Have it, enjoy it. Have those beneficial experiences in the first place, and then especially don't waste them on your brain. What I would suggest for a person, so I think of this in kind of like 3 levels, all right? Okay. So level 1 is simply to develop the habit of taking in the good as you move through your day. In other words, as you move through your day, you get out of bed, you're kind of groggy, whatever, and then you have your cup of coffee. And there's that opportunity to register, this tastes good, or your tea or whatever it is you do in the morning, or your superpower smoothie, I don't know. This tastes good, this feels good, why not? Or then you get ready, you go to work and you look around, you go, wow, no bombs are going off in my front yard. Sorry about what's happening elsewhere in the world maybe, but not here at least. It's relatively peaceful and orderly. Flowers are blooming. The streets lights are working. Yeah, I can let in a sense of relief, of safety, of orderliness in my life. I don't need to have such a, paper tiger paranoia about the world around me. All right, then you go to work. Life happens, boom, and then you get something done. Maybe it was tricky, challenging, you navigated a difficult email to write or an awkward conversation, or maybe you're in a setting where someone is appreciative of you, right? Rather than blowing right by it, notice it, feel it, recognize it, open to it. Help it last 5, 10, 20 seconds in a row. Feel it in your body. See the ways that it's personally relevant. Why would it be good for you to feel this? Great. These are different factors that increase encoding, the conversion of states to traits, et cetera. So number 1, develop the habit half a dozen times a day of just showing up for your own good life. Why waste it, right? Why not be there for it?
I like it.
That's the first level. The second level is to grow the particular strengths inside that will help you deal with your issues, either challenges in your life today, like a very stressful job, or you're going through a divorce, or you're trying to really motivate yourself to keep up with your exercise program. Okay. Or very commonly for people, you're still dealing with, lacks and wounds from your last relationship as an adult, or maybe the impact of childhood experiences. In other words, you've got a particular issue going on. And therefore, it's helpful to look for what are those experiences, I call them antidote experiences or vitamin C's, that are targeted at your particular need. My particular need growing up wasn't related very much to safety, that category of needs, or to our needs for satisfaction. I was not traumatized as a kid, and we had enough food on the table and so forth. But in terms of our third great need for connection, broadly defined, of one kind or another that's healthy, that was really where my issues were. So landing in adulthood and, doing practices now for a lot of decades, the main target for me has really been around taking in experiences, taking in supplies, as it were, and filling myself up with them that had to do with my wounds and my deficits having to do with relationships. So the second level is to look for those experiences and look for those opportunities to grow resources inside yourself that address particular issues. That's extremely powerful. And in my book, Hardwiring Happiness, and in other places, I have lists of sort of psychological resources and key experiences that target particular issues. It's sort of like, if you have a flat tire, you need a tire. Filling your tank with gas is nice, but it doesn't address the key issue. Right? Then the third level, the deepest level, which I think is really quite profound, is to address the ways in which, if we feel like our core needs are not being met, in other words, if in our kind of core there's a sense of deficit or disturbance, that tends to trigger the craving, very broadly defined, that the Buddha pointed out 2,500 years ago in a very psychological way. The craving, the drivenness, the fearfulness, the fightingness, the clingingness, what have you, all aspects of craving, mostly quite subtle. I'm not talking about shooting up. I'm
even
talking
the busyness.
Yeah, busyness, drivenness, like that thing that came over you right after you had that big win with your new, book contract. I can relate to that experience. Boom, you were on to the next thing. Rather than staying centered, doing the next thing you needed to do while feeling this enormous win and really, really letting it reverberate inside you. What happens over time as we repeatedly internalize the sense, the experience of our core needs met, which I and others categorize loosely as safety, satisfaction, connection, related loosely to the reptile, mammal, and primate layers of the three-stage evolution of the brain. As we repeatedly internalize those experiences as we go through our day and track a falling away of craving, we're tracking the falling away of a sense of deficit inside, a not enoughness inside, a hollowness or emptiness inside that we need to fill. And we also track the falling away of any sense of disturbance, agitation, uneasiness, and instead replace it with a growing sense of stability, balance, walking evenly, as it were, over the uneven ground of life. We're still engaged with life, but we have a sense of fullness and stability and well-being in our core, even as we deal with challenges of various kinds. When we repeatedly do that again and again and again, I say 10,000 times, 10 seconds at a time, as we do that, more and more the underlying neuropsychological, biological basis for craving in the Buddha's second noble truth is gradually undone. There's less and less basis for it. You realize in this moment, there's no reason for fear. In this moment, there's no basis really for anger. Actual basis. In this moment, there's no need for frustration or disappointment. There's so much fullness already. I'm going to keep going toward my important goals, trying not to get attached to the results, but I can do it on the basis of feeling already full, already at ease, already contented, already fulfilled in this life. And the same with our relationships. We can deal with conflicts with others. We can chase that girl, chase that dream, chase that guy. We can do those things while feeling already fundamentally cared about, already of worth inside ourselves, and already stably centered in the knowing of our own good heart. And that third deepest level, I think, is fantastic. And it has also huge implications for the world altogether. Because if we get a tipping point of human brains, my loose number is 1 billion. If we get 1 billion brains, centered in the green zone, of the responsive mode of the brain, its core setting, its resting state, our true home base. If we can get a critical mass of people rested in the green zone of their own brains, most minutes of most days, I think that will help change the course of human history and guide our planet to a softer landing than the one that it's currently heading toward. You can do it. In other words, you're having a day, right? Hopefully, you're having your day. You can move through your day with a deliberate attentiveness to the good facts around you and inside you, and then helping that recognition of good facts actually move your needle a little bit, at least feel something as a result. To shift your perspective, your point of view, feel something in your body, let your emotions change a little bit, shift your desires, your values, your intentions, your dreams, let yourself feel it a little bit. Second, and then third, stay with it. Enjoy it for a few breaths, a little bit longer than you normally would, to feel like it's really coming into yourself, giving yourself over to it, really receiving the benefit of the moment. You can do that. No one can stop you from doing that.
The one thing we can do is understand that our happy chemicals did not evolve to be on all the time. It's very easy to understand what turns them on in animals. They turn on when you step toward a survival need. Mm-hmm. And the more your survival needs are met, the more you tend to obsess over social needs, and feeling like you belong to a group meets a social need. And most groups in the animal world define themselves in reference to a common enemy. So that continual sense of a common enemy is often used to strengthen social bonds. But then it's all about negativity, because that we talked about that in the context of my other book. So the bottom line is you have power over your own brain. Mm-hmm. You are controlling your own happy chemicals using neural circuits that you built from your early experience. You can build new circuits, but it's harder than you think, but you can't wait for the world to trigger your happy chemicals for you. If you look in the animal world, they have the same happy chemicals that we have. So whenever you're feeling good, your brain is turning on one of these chemicals: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, or endorphin. Each one has a very specific job. It's only released when you take a step towards something that meets a survival need. We could talk about all the individual ones. But the point is, in the modern world, there's often this idea of, well, we shouldn't just survive, we should thrive. And that's a lot of, nice vocabulary. But in the end, people stress about everything. And surviving to the animal brain is making copies of your genes. Now, none of us define success anymore by how many offspring we create, but in the state of nature, people who've studied this, reproductive success is what stimulates your happy chemicals. So that, of course, can make us a little nuts, because we're trying not to do that, mm-hmm. which is why people then go nuts over small things. But the more you understand what your mammal brain is doing, the more you can take control over it instead of externalizing it and thinking something is wrong with the world. Okay, so let's start with dopamine is the basic that says, I am about to meet a need. So when you are young, you're born, you don't have any ability to meet your own need. So all you can do is wait until other people meet your needs for you. And each time someone meets your need, your dopamine surges like, wow, this is it. This is what I need. And that sort of paves a neural pathway that turns on the dopamine more easily the next time when you see anything related to that moment. So your brain isn't intellectualizing about what matters. It's just connecting everything active at that moment. If you have to drive for a mile to get that brownie and look for a parking spot for a half hour, dopamine, 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 and then it all ends so soon. So one response to that would be to have another brownie. And we all know the consequences of that. And therefore, we're better off understanding how our dopamine works. It's like, oh, so the quest for the brownie is what made me happy, and focus ourselves on a quest. But again, to let your quest be defined by yourself rather than someone who's trying to recruit you to their anger. Your neurons literally reach out and touch each other when you're stimulating them. So when you're born, you have billions of neurons, but they're not connected. The only way they connect is from experience. So any dopamine experience wires your neurons, and the electricity in your brain flows into the pathways you have. So it's very hard to do something in a new way. Not that I'm saying you shouldn't, but when you see how hard it is, you usually give up. So you have to understand this to not give up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the first physiological mechanism. The second is what's called myelin. Some people have heard about this in the context of training. So myelin is like a fatty coating on neurons that makes them super efficient. So anything you do with your myelinated neurons, you do so easily that you don't even notice. Speaking your native language versus trying to learn a new language in adulthood. Learning a musical skill or a sports skill that you learned when you were young versus trying to learn in adulthood. So myelin is abundant when you're young.
Mm-hmm.
It spurts before age 8 and during puberty. So if you figure out what you were doing in those times, you'll say, oh my God, that's the template I'm living today. Anything else I try to do is going to feel wrong, even when I'm really committed to it. So it's that feeling that it's wrong, which is that effort of trying to send your electricity down new neural pathways. And once you understand that uncomfortable feeling, then you can devote yourself more to developing the new neural pathways because you have a tolerance for that discomfort. Nobody had an ideal childhood because childhood is a time of dependency, and that cannot train you for the independence of adulthood. So we all end up with frustration because when you were a child, it was a life or death crisis if your needs didn't get met.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sense of crisis is also wired in, and that's part of adulthood is challenging that sense of crisis and realizing that you're okay. Imagine you're in the Amazon rainforest and you want to carve a new pathway, and your jungle of neurons is the same. And it's so hard to take a new step in the jungle where there's no path that you work and work just to take one step. And you work really hard to take another step. And it's so frustrating that you think, oh, I'm just going to take the highway. It's not worth it. So that's why we all just go with our old habits. But if you're ever in the Amazon and you take a highway, you know that it goes to some really yucky cities. And you're like, no, I'm going to invest the effort to carve a new pathway. But if you go back to your new pathway the next day, the jungle grows over and all your work is wasted. But if you carve that same pathway every day, then you will actually build a new trail. And in 45 days, that trail is established. Just like if you could imagine cutting the same plants every day, the trail is established enough to have a flow of electricity. It's not as big as the flow on the highway, but it's enough to flow so that you feel natural doing your new behavior. We're all very aware of distrust. And so when we try to take steps toward trust, those distrust circuits get activated. So that can leave you with a bad feeling. So build trust in small steps, I always say. So what would be an example of a small step? When I first started this, I had so much anxiety that, like, if I would make contact with a store clerk and they wouldn't look back at me, I would feel rejected, So, and then I realized, like, wow, this is such a good way to practice because then I'm learning to manage that feeling. I don't need to control the store clerk or to control other people or to feel accepted every minute. I know that, like, it's so cool to read about it from the animal perspective. And by the way, my other book, I, Mammal, is more of the animal information. Animals work so hard to stay with the herd. And we in the modern world, we want our independence. We don't want to be forced to stay with the herd. So we're constantly panicking that we don't have a herd. So we need to learn to be comfortable with that feeling instead of blaming it on the person who rejected you. So build trust in small steps. So what can I do to feel trust where I'm not going to end up feeling like a crisis? So, one example would be with a stranger. One would be with the person at the desk next to you that you have like a love-hate relationship with. And one could be with like the person you live with that, we all have our frictions. And think of small steps that you could do to build trust with that person.
The times in our lives when we should be taking the best care of our brain tends to be the time in our lives where we actually self-medicate with all of these American factory-farmed foods. We withdraw instead of connecting to our friends and the people that love us and who can actually make us feel better. Everybody knows that if you eat too much sugar, too much flour, you're probably going to gain weight. You're probably going to get diabetes one day. But we now know, and this is the groundbreaking science, that spiking your blood sugar with all that processed food, with all that sugar and flour, it actually fogs the brain and causes plaques, brain fog, later dementia and Alzheimer's disease. And the actual physical appearance of those plaques resemble the plaques in the body for people that have other physical conditions. As Americans, we tend to spike our blood sugar all day long. So not only if you spike your blood sugar, is that going to affect you in the short term? So if you have a big plate of pasta or French fries for lunch, and I gave you some psych testing right after lunch, you would be a little foggy. So it affects you in the short term, but then over the long term, it can actually fog your brain with plaques that there are no cure for, right? Dementia, mild neurocognitive decline, Alzheimer's disease, all of these diseases that are actually tripling over the next few decades. So it really is something that we actually have so much power over, and it's not an inevitable part of aging. A high omega-3 EPA has shown to be as effective in treating major depressive disorder as prescription antidepressants. And I don't think most people taking an antidepressant know that. I don't think they know that they have a choice. And I don't think most people, what's really interesting, my grandpa grew up on a farm in Ohio. And even if you're eating the same foods as you always have, the food itself has changed. So in my grandpa's generation, most farms were family farms. So that means that all of these animals are on a farm. They're just roaming around, eating whatever's on the ground, grasses, all these really great substances, because it's not just you are what you eat, you are what you ate, right? So whatever they're eating, you're eating. So now the vast majority of our animal products, milk, dairy, eggs, they're factory farmed. So what that does in the brain, family farming, organic, grass-fed, any sort of animal product, doesn't matter if it's beef or milk or chicken. Family farms, higher omega-3s, lower omega-6s. Factory farming, very, very high omega-6s, very, very low omega-3s.
And you want to get that in a ratio of like 1 to 1.
That's right. Or 2 to 1. But right now, the most Americans are eating about 25 times more pro-inflammatory omega-6s that fog the brain to every one omega-3 that has anti-inflammatory effects, that prevents dementia, that prevents depression, that can help improve mood. So we know that these invisible changes in our food supply are wreaking havoc on our brains. When we look at things through a black or white, it's I had a caller on my radio show just yesterday, and she had made amends with her father, right? So her father was abusive. She had made amends, and so she thought that she was moving from black to white, and now she should just be, oh, I'm done. I've forgiven him, and well, now everything should be great. And she didn't understand why she still had residual feelings after she apologized for him. So in this case, that was polarization. That was looking at it, if I don't accept his apology, that's black. But once I do, everything will be sunshine and rainbows, and it will be perfect, and all of my feelings will just go away, and I'll just feel completely happy all the time. So we do that a lot in our lives. So whether it's that job, we think that is the one job for us, and we fail to see the gray area that lies between these two poles. When we can live in these shades of gray, we tend to see more opportunity. We tend to we're kinder to ourselves because we don't expect perfection. And then you pair that with an omega-3 superfood, and I have a list of the omega-3 superfoods in the book that are high in omega-3s, low in mercury. You eat one of those every day to feed your brain, and all of a sudden, that's right. So neuroplasticity is such a buzzword, and we now know, just a generation ago, scientists thought the brain was done great growing at 25. And now we know that's not true. There are ways that you can grow and shape your brain every single day, in every day, whether you're 25 or 85. Moving away, here's one very simple switch that will actually taste a lot better. So we eat, if you go into your pantry or your kitchen and you look at the back of your salad dressing, your mayonnaise, the oils you cook with, almost every processed food, even, this makes me really angry when food companies do this. Even some spaghetti sauces that say made with olive oil on the front, if you turn that around and you look at the back, soybean oil. Soybean oil is one of the main culprits in that high omega-6 state that most Americans are in. The opposite of that, the healthy olive oil. We know that people who use olive oil for both cooking and for their salad dressings and, cooking, sauteing your spinach at night. I just had some organic eggs this morning. I sprayed my pan with light olive oil, not extra virgin, because for dressings, you want to use extra virgin. For cooking, you want to look for light olive oil because
Light's more stable.
Virgin, yeah, that's right. More stable at high temperatures. And we know from long-term studies that people who used olive oil for both cooking and dressing had better cognitive function as they aged. But what are most Americans eating every single day, every single meal? Soybean oil. It's everywhere. Yeah, so remember, our gut is our second brain. The vast majority of our serotonin, that main feel-good neurotransmitter that creates a state of happiness and also peace, right? So it makes you happy, but it also relieves anxiety. It's not made up here. It's made down here in your belly. So we know that eating artificial sweeteners kills the good bacteria in your gut. But the standard American diet with all these factory farm foods, with all of these blood sugar spikes, we now know that this is just research that's come out in the past couple of years, that it actually shrinks your brain. And the program that I recommend in the Brain Fog Fix, which has been study after study, even studies that are just coming out this year in 2016, we know, I talk about the modified Mediterranean diet. If you eat a modified Mediterranean diet, you are going to help grow and protect your brain. We know that people who follow this program, so I say modified because this is not the American Italian diet. This is not pizza and pasta. We're talking about healthy grilled fish. We're talking about nuts. We're talking about berries. We're talking about, and two good news, two of the best health foods for your brain, in moderation, of course, coffee and red wine. We know that people who have, let's say, 3 cups of coffee a day and 1 glass of red wine per day, you are much likely to be diagnosed with dementia. It reduces inflammation, and they'll both have antioxidants. So we know that this modified Mediterranean diet is really neuroprotective. This really helps people to understand why in a large-scale study, the people who ate 7, not 4, not 5, but 7 servings of vegetables and fruits every single day were happier, less frequently depressed. Their cognitive function will likely improve. And we know that listen, we have all of these what are called cofactors. So we have these 2 main feel-good hormones, these neurotransmitters, serotonin and dopamine. Now your brain takes these amino acids that you probably already eat in your diet. So for example, the tryptophan from that turkey, and then your body turns that into 5-HTP, which becomes serotonin. And in terms of dopamine, the tyrosine that you're having in those, or that I had in my organic eggs this morning, becomes L-DOPA, which then becomes dopamine. But guess what? Your body needs all of these cofactors, right? So folate is one of the most important cofactors. Now, a cofactor is a vitamin or mineral that your body needs to make that conversion from amino acid to those neurotransmitters. So folate is a B vitamin. So folate and all of the other B vitamins, vitamin C, iron, you got to get all of these. And guess what? If you eat 7 servings of fruits and vegetables every day, you're probably going to get them all. Supplements can be great for people. And the other supplement that I recommend for vegetarians, this question always comes up. If you're eating I have a lot of the omega-3 superfoods, and most of them are fish, and fish are the most potent source. And a lot of people are going to be surprised when they read that list that there are actually a lot of farm-raised fish that are okay to eat. But it just depends on the species, right? So if you're eating salmon, you do not want farm-raised. But for example, rainbow trout, farm-raised, high in omega-3s and low in mercury, but only that variety of fish, right? But some of those vegetarian superfoods, like, for example, walnuts. So that is not EPA or DHA. So fish have EPA, your brain's main feel-good omega-3, and also DHA, which is your brain's think-better omega-3. It helps to preserve cognitive function. Now, vegetarian sources have ALA, which your body then has to convert into those two other omega-3s, EPA and DHA, but it doesn't do a very good job of converting ALA into DHA in particular. So another supplement that vegetarians can opt for is algae. Algae is a way to get that DHA, and you can probably get enough EPA from eating ALAs and flax seeds and walnuts because your body will convert that ALA to mostly EPA. It's a confusing formula, but if you get that formula right, we know that people who eat fish regularly, you're much less likely to be depressed. You're much less likely to be diagnosed with dementia. So just these simple swaps and switches, understanding this magic formula, because it really is a magic formula. You know, I combed through all of the best studies from around the world to see, you know, for example, how many cups of coffee. If you want to reduce your risk of dementia by over 50%, it's that magic number, 3 cups of coffee. You don't want to go over too much because then other large-scale studies show that people who are drinking 5, 6, 7 can increase their risk of death. But, you know, 3 cups will not increase your risk of death and also reduce your risk of dementia. So it really is this complicated formula of how much of what should I be eating and drinking every single day. And we know that mindfulness meditation, for example, you were talking about it in terms of ADHD. At UCLA, where I studied mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, they're using mindfulness meditation to treat ADHD. We know that mindfulness-based cognitive therapy is very effective in treating depression, anxiety. So many Americans, looking at the statistics, more and more people are abandoning spiritual practice. So we know that chanting, prayer, meditation, even counting rosary beads, all of these meditative practices have a place. They do something great in the human brain. They promote a state of peace, connectivity. We know that in brain scans, it only takes about 12 minutes of meditation before you start to see a positive effect. We know that a Kundalini yoga meditation can help reverse memory loss in older people experiencing memory loss. We know that mindfulness meditation reduces anxiety, depression, can help with ADHD. And as less and less Americans are going to a place of worship, they're also just becoming completely secular. And, you know, it's like if one religion didn't fit for them, for example, let's say you grew up Southern Baptist and you don't identify with the Southern Baptist Church, you then just swear off all religion and with that all spirituality altogether and just become this American who is obsessed with the Kardashians and credit cards all day, right? So we don't want that extreme. And listen, I'm not telling you to believe in any one religion, but I am telling you that it's absolutely essential to find a spiritual practice. It can be religious, it can be secular, and it can be, mindfulness meditation. A lot of the underpinnings are from the Buddhist religion, but mindfulness meditation itself, even if you don't have any religious belief and you're just using it as a secular practice, it still has the same benefits in the brain. So I think so many Americans need to figure out what is that practice that will take care of my brain. Because, by the way, meditation and prayer, it stimulates the most advanced part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain that separates us from animals. So it explains why human beings, we need spiritual practice, but little Rocco does not need to spend his day meditating. But by the way, Rocco is my little Buddha because he's always so present, right? So it doesn't matter what we're doing. He is there. When we're walking, he is paying attention to that grass, to what's in front of him. He is not checking his phone while he's walking. Human beings, that's what we do. We multitask. We fog the brain by not giving things our full attention. So the NBAC, if you've ever played that childhood game Concentration, that's a version of the NBAC. So if you don't have my book and you want to play right now, you can actually play, if you have a deck of cards, you can play a version of the NBAC just by looking for pairs like you used to do when you played Concentration when you were a kid. And then for senior moments, we know that the best foods are turmeric, berries, especially all berries, but blueberries in particular, can halt cognitive decline by about 2.5 years on average if you're eating blueberries all the time. And then fish, so again, this really, and you mentioned at the beginning of our interview, children. What's good for the developing brain is good for the young adult brain, which is good for the mommy brain, which is good for the old brain. So it really is. It's not like once you're older, you should start eating blueberries. You should be eating blueberries. I should be eating blueberries.
I am a wild blueberry-aholic.
Good. We love that. And the other thing is again, this magic formula. Always check out the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. Mm-hmm. So blueberries, one of the very best foods in your brain, but also it tends to be one of the most polluted. So blueberries tend to be one of the fruits that you want to make sure you're buying organic. If you can't afford to buy every fruit organic, blueberries are ones that you want to make sure you're getting organic.
Automatic writing is perhaps the most cutting-edge tool for connecting with the other side, which is why we've written the definitive guide called the Automatic Writing Experience. To find out more, simply visit automaticwriting.com. It's my favorite way to help you to shine bright. Woohoo!